Thank you for tuning in to No Sudden Moves Radio. And remember, stay on the proven path so you don't risk falling behind. Here at Business Legends, we don't overthink it. Look around and see what everyone else is doing. If it's working for them, it will work for you.
Welcome to Wait It Out, where we believe there's no reason to act now. The opportunity will still be there when the timing is better.
The age of disruption isn't coming, it's here. And the boldest move isn't following the crowd, it's following your why. I'm Patrick Leddin, and you're listening to Disruption Lab. Welcome to Disruption Lab Podcast, the podcast where we talk about the curveballs in life, the things that go your way. You know exactly what I mean. The stuff that might trip you up, or maybe not. Maybe it's the stuff that, although it could trip you up, actually is the exact thing you need to get on the path you want to get on in life. I'm Patrick Leddin, and each week I have the opportunity to sit down and talk to a positive disruptor in the world, somebody who's shaking things up and making things happen. And today I'm excited to introduce my guest, Serena Ainslie. Serena and I have known each other for a number of years. I first met her when she joined one of my classes at Vanderbilt University. And as they say, the rest from there is history. So without going any further, I'm going to introduce Serena to you and let her tell you a little bit about her story. Serena, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Patrick. It's so fun to be here. Very full circle moment, as you said, from the classroom to the podcast.
I know, right? All right. And you know, I'm not getting any day older. It's amazing how that happens.
I believe it. That's how it feels.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, totally. So, kind of from the beginning, grew up in Florida, to two amazing parents on the older end. I kind of was a late in life surprise for them, which is amazing because when I was younger, I got to hear kind of all of the stories of both of their amazing careers that they were kind of on the tail ends of when I was growing up. But I think as I got to, high school and college, because of their mentorship and their stories that they shared with me, I kind of knew I wanted to either start my own company or run my own company. I had a very entrepreneurial kind of inkling from an early age, but funny enough, I just didn't really know what that looked like. As you said, I obviously went to Vanderbilt for my undergrad and kind of tried to figure out what exactly that path to entrepreneurship looked like in college. But I think as a lot of college students who go to a liberal arts school can relate to, there weren't a lot of examples of people starting companies right out of college. So I kind of fell into the trap that I think a lot of people fall into when they're, 20, 21, know they want to do something in business, but don't really know how to start. And I went down the consulting route. So my goal was, do a few years in consulting, figure out how businesses work, and then go, start my own thing or join a startup that had a mission I was aligned with. But ultimately, ended up with a job at EY out of college. I was actually on their human capital consulting team, but pretty quickly realized that I was not getting out of it what I was expecting. So, in the human capital team, the projects were quite long and I didn't get the kind of dynamic experience with a ton of different industries that I was expecting to get in consulting. I was also living in San Francisco at the time, and I was meeting a lot of people who were working in the sustainability space, which was something that I had been passionate about, something I studied actually in college. And I started to realize there was this field of consulting that solely focused on sustainability. And I had a moment where I was like, okay, I, am only a year out of school. I have very limited data as to what I really like doing in the corporate world, but I know what I don't like doing. And I have now found out that there's this thing that seems more aligned with what I want to do long term. So I'm going to pivot into that type of consulting. Luckily, EY had a sustainability consulting kind of team, and that was an opportunity I had still with my firm. So
Let me let
moved
me
into that.
let me interrupt you really quickly there. If you it might, I
Yeah,
promise we'll get back to the rest of the story because it's so interesting. But when you talked about one, it wasn't quite what you thought it was going to be initially, or you weren't getting the exposure experience that you thought we'd get. I mean, what kept you from just saying, I'll just ride this out for another 5 or 10 or 15 years? What made you say, what, I'm in control of this here. I'm gonna do something different or look a little bit in a different spot. Because sometimes people don't realize it in 2 years, or maybe they do realize it in a couple of years, but they don't look up again for another 10 years. And
yeah,
what caused you to say, I'm not going to continue to invest if it's not the right thing?
yeah. So I think I was almost lucky. This is going to sound funny to say. I was lucky that I was really unhappy at work because it kind of lit a fire under me to realize that like I could not just stay in this role for 10 years. I actually think like the most dangerous place to be in if you're unhappy at work is just a place where you're comfortable but don't feel challenged. You don't feel like you're getting everything out of it that you want because you can make up excuses for why you should stay there. And I think I was not in that position. I was like, I had in my head like a list of maybe like 10 things that I really wanted to be getting out of a job, and like I really was getting maybe 1 out of 10. And I was like, I know that I'm early in my career and I know that there's a certain level of kind of just grind that you have to put into it, but like if I don't even feel like this is taking me towards like the position I ultimately want to be in. Like I don't feel like I'm getting the learning out of it that I want, and I'm not enjoying it. It just felt like it was time to pivot. And I think like, people say in the startup world, like failing fast is actually an amazing thing. Figuring out quickly what you don't like is an amazing thing because it gives you, the gift of time because you can, you know, move on faster
Yeah, I
than
mean, one of the worst things is when you're like, I don't think I like it, but I'm not sure, right?
exactly.
If you know you don't like it, then you just
Yeah, you're
move
out.
on. It's funny you said that about getting comfortable, about being comfortable. So I was speaking to a group not that long ago, and somebody asked me the question, what's the opposite of what we talk about in the book, Disrupt Everything and Win? What's the opposite of a positive disruptor? And you would think at some level the answer would be, well, it's a negative disruptor, right? Because negative is the opposite of positive. At least I think it is. But that's not the answer, I don't think. The answer, we all know negative disruptors. They're the ones you don't want to go to the meeting at because that curmudgeon's in the room and they just blow stuff up to be difficult or a jerk or whatever. But the opposite of being a positive disruptor is the constant pursuit of comfort.
Mm,
If I want to, I just want to be comfortable. I know where my desk is at. I know what time the meetings are. It doesn't matter. It's not fulfilling me. At least I know it, type of thing. That will
yeah,
hold you back from doing so many great things.
totally agree. And like comfort isn't always a bad thing. For some people, comfort is the goal. And if that's the case, then that's what you should seek. But if you're choosing the comfortable thing because you aren't taking the initiative to figure out what you really want, I think that's where it gets dangerous, you
Yeah,
know?
ultimately, it's like what life are you trying to live? And
Exactly.
if the
Yeah.
life that you're trying to live is not going to be obtained by sitting in a certain spot, you kind of owe it to yourself to experience some other stuff. Okay, so human capital space wasn't working for you. Projects were a little long. You weren't getting the exposure. You learned about the sustainment side. So where do we go from there?
Yeah, so joined the sustainability consulting group at EY. Really excited, thought that that was going to be kind of the moment where I started to really like working, like the corporate world, etc. And had, you know, a bit of a realization there. I actually was there for quite some time. I spent 4 years on that team. And through that experience, I learned a lot. It was a really interesting time to be in sustainability. But ultimately, like a couple years in, I still wasn't scratching that entrepreneurial itch that I had from, for as long as I can remember. And um, I just started to feel a little bit bored at work, which again, I initially was really frustrated by. I felt like I had, just made a change in my career trajectory, and I thought it was going to be more aligned with what I was looking for. So that boredom like really bothered me. But looking back, I actually think it was such a like blessing in disguise because it again lit a fire under me to go search for something else. So I kind of, realized that I wanted to be either working on something else or doing something else. And at this same time, I actually started dating someone who was doing a lot of really interesting investing on a personal level with his friends. He actually also went to Vandy. He was buying crypto with his friends. He was angel investing in his friends' companies or people in his network's companies. He was getting exposure to real estate investing. And I was like, this is really interesting. Like, I would love to get access to these asset classes. Like, I'm getting to the point in my career where I can start, playing with money a bit more and investing more actively in these different asset classes. Like, how do you find out about these deals? And he was like, oh, well, our friends just talk about this all the time. Like, we just share deals with each other, whatever. And I was like, that's so funny. Like, we both went to Vandy. We both have really smart friends. All of our friends have pretty similar jobs, but women just aren't doing that. Like, the female spaces that I'm in are not sharing deals. We're not talking about investing. And I started to chat with actually a few Vandy girlfriends about this, and they had really similar experiences where they were trying to get into angel investing and just facing a lot of almost like social barriers to it. Which, if you're trying to invest in the stock market, you don't need to necessarily have a network of people who are also really interested in talking about the stock market because you can just go buy stocks and you don't have to have connections to do that. But for a lot of these alternative assets, like you kind of need to know people to get into them. So it was bothering me that I had this desire to do something and I couldn't do it. So ultimately, two Vandy friends and I started chatting about how we could fix it. And we decided that we would get together a group of women who we knew were interested in alternative investing or learning more about it, breaking into it to some degree. And we would meet on a biweekly basis over Zoom and just chat about different investing topics and bring people in who worked full time in those spaces to kind of answer questions and help us feel more comfortable so that when opportunities came our way, we would feel like we had the knowledge and that like, expertise to actually be able to deploy capital into these opportunities. Um, that small group, largely of Vanderbilt women actually, kind of snowballed. And we started to just chat with other women in our networks about what we were doing. And we had crazy inbound interest. A lot of people had just experienced this pain point before and were really interested in the space, but didn't know where to get started. So ultimately, through those conversations and then an in-person event that we hosted in New York in August of 2024, where we had a wait list of 600 people. We just realized like there's demand for this,
Yeah,
and we need to,
talk about some demand, huh? Right?
yeah,
600 people
yeah,
on your wait list, yeah.
exactly. But we just
I don't know if I have
realized,
600 people on my network. You have them on your wait list.
well,
That's amazing.
us too. And I'm happy to chat about kind of how we like reached people too. I think that like if you have any, founders who listen to your podcast or just people who are trying to, grow anything, I think there's so many little things about growth that I've learned from this experience that are really interesting and like accessible to most people. But anyways, so January rolls around, we officially launch Girl Math Capital. Um, so we are an alternative investing community for women. We offer a 4-month boot camp for women looking to break into alternative investing. It focuses on angel investing, real estate, and crypto. We also curate deal flow for our members. These are opportunities that our members can choose to invest in. And then we offer in-person and virtual events to build our community beyond just investing. Um, so we started that in January. It's now, as we're having this conversation, September, and we have over 200 members. Our members have invested over $150,000 into over 10 early stage startups. We've had over 30 events, and we're kind of just getting started. It's
That's
crazy.
awesome.
So, it's been a really wild ride, but a lot of learnings in that I'm happy to dive into. So wherever
Well,
you
one thing
go
that
from
we noticed
there.
when people deal with like these moments where they go, I'm going to go a different direction, or I'm going to pivot, I'm going to change, or whatever it might be. There's often this disruption that happens, sometimes just between their ears, where they're like
Yeah.
sitting there thinking about this. For you, was it a uh, kind of a slow burning thing where you like saw what your boyfriend at the time you said had access to, and you listened to that and like, gosh, I don't have that, or was there a moment where you're like, wait a minute, how did it play out for you? Was it like a slow burning thing over time, or was there a moment where you just like it clicked?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think it was both. So for me personally, it felt like a bit of a slow burning experience where I noticed he had access and I noticed that some of my male coworkers were also doing kind of similar investing with some of their friends. And then I just started to like take note of these differences in the way that men and women talked about money and investing and you know, like had social experiences around that. So I would say my personal journey with like getting to the point where I was like, I want to start this was a bit of a slow burn. But I actually had a I have a specific moment where I realized that this is not just something that I experience. So I remember sitting at a Friendsgiving dinner in 2023, and we were going around the table, all women, there were about 15 of us. We were going around the table talking about kind of what we wanted to do in the next year. And I basically got on my soapbox and started talking about how annoyed I was about the fact that I wanted to be investing in these things, but I couldn't like figure out how to get started. And I wasn't asking anyone to agree with me or like weigh in on that experience at all. I was kind of just talking about it and talking about how I wanted to solve that for myself. And of the 15 women there, nine of them maybe were like, I feel this and I want there to be a solution. And I was like, huh, okay, well, obviously this is a small sample size, but like there's clearly some other women who have experienced the same thing. And now I feel like we at least have a small group who would be interested in doing this. But, there's a lot of 15 women
Yeah.
Friendsgiving dinners of, really bright, ambitious women happening around the world. Like this clearly can't be an isolated experience. So that was the moment where I remember texting my co-founders now the next day and I was like, okay, we got to do this. Like there is demand. I think that like we're the right team to be doing this. So let's just try it. And like if it doesn't work, whatever. Like we were all at our corporate jobs still. We were planning on just doing it as a side hustle. And the worst thing that would happen is like we learned a lot and then we moved on?
It kind of reminds me of scale's different in a regard, in some ways, no doubt. But Harry Shave, uh, the company that does the razors,
Yep.
Jim and I interviewed them for Disrupt Everything and Win, and both Andy Katz Mayfield and Jeff Rader. Jeff Rader had already founded Warby Parker,
Hmm.
and then Andy Katz Mayfield talks about a moment when he was trying to buy razor blades, and he went into a convenience store. And he's like, you would think I was trying to buy, it's not exactly what he said, but you think I'm trying to buy like ammunition for a weapon or something, right? It's
Right.
everything behind a locked case. He's like, I'm just trying to give you my money to get these blades and I can't seem to get access to them. And he said that I just started talking to a few other people and everybody was having the same experience. And I'm all about customer discovery. And I think it's good to spend a lot of time um, learning for different people, but it doesn't sometimes take a big N of number of people to realize I'm onto something here. And
For
that's
sure.
exactly where he was at, became a $2 billion business. I'm sure that's exactly where you're at as you're building, $2 billion worth of investments. But it's yeah, fingers crossed. But it's that same
Yeah.
type of thing. You start going, gosh, I'm honest. Does anybody else see this? And
Right.
and that's one thing we found about one of the reasons I want to talk to you is because we found that there's sometimes we catch ourselves like sleepwalking through life.
Yeah.
The expression would be like you driving along and you're like, was that light green or yellow or red I just drove through? Because we're just kind of on autopilot. And one of the things we found about people who are positive disruptors like yourself, that they actually think deeply about things in order to gain insights. It's the first behavior we talk about in the book. You think deeply to gain insights. And I think that's exactly what you were doing. You're like, wait a
Yeah.
minute, I don't have what I want, and I wonder if there's other people, and what's going on here? So let me ask you this. What do you think, as you've thought about this problem that you're working to solve, what are some insights that you've garnered about why the problem exists?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's a lot of reasons. Part of it, I think, is despite the fact that there have been, incredible advancements in women's opportunities in the workforce and, women control so much more of wealth in America than ever before. There's just still a social stigma around women discussing money. And I think that, as I was saying earlier, there's small, like issues that come from that if, you're just interested in investing in the public markets. But where it really becomes amplified is when you're trying to access a market that is inherently network driven and
Hmm.
something that like you need to be able to talk to others about. So I think there's a lot of studies out there of why women don't feel comfortable talking about money. I, you know, don't remember all of the stats of them right now, but um, I think that's a big one. And then once you get past kind of the information barrier, so once women start talking about these alternatives and get excited about them, etc., a big thing that we've seen is just a different approach to investing that often comes from a difference in risk tolerance. So, not to make a generalization, but I'll speak from personal experience. Um, Men that I interact with I'm getting my MBA right now. So in the MBA classroom and in the Vanderbilt classroom and in the workforce and in my personal life, the way that they talk about investing and the way that they actually invest is often just way more risk on. They feel like they don't need to know as much about the opportunity. They feel like they have an inherent like, you know, sixth sense. It's like I have a feeling that this is going to be a good one. Or like they do the research and they're like, yeah, like cool, I'm down to put $5,000 into this. Like that's not that big of a deal. The way that I see women often going about this, and I think a lot of this comes, is very deeply rooted in kind of the way that different genders are treated in the world, but there's often a lack of confidence around financial decisions that transparently I think we just need to work hard to overcome. And then once you get that confidence, I think there's also just like a different approach to risk. So alternatives like are often far riskier than investing in the stock market. So, getting comfortable writing a check to an early stage founder when the odds are like that company is probably not going to be around in 5 years, like you have to get a bit comfortable with having like you have to get your risk tolerance up. So I think that there's reasons why those differences are there within genders, but I actually think that the way that women invest um, is really like special and makes us really strong investors. But I think in terms of just like initially getting into this space, that's a big reason that I've seen women like self-limit in initially jumping in. Once they get comfortable, like women outperform men in investing, and alternatives are no different. But I think it's just that initial kind of, you know, that leap of faith that you have to take that is a little bit harder for a variety of reasons.
It's really interesting because I know that when you think about a global perspective, there has been lots of challenges associated with financial acumen or access to capital in women. A lot of developing countries and locations where it's very, a very patriarchal society, and they just don't have access to funding. I mean, that's where like micro lending movements have come from and things
Yeah.
like that, and et cetera. But it's interesting to see when you get to kind of another level of sophistication and risk tolerance and
Yeah.
willingness to make some choices that, you know, it's everywhere to some extent. And I mean, that we could kind of sit and break down the systemic things associated with
Right.
it, but I think it's more just the awareness of it and the willingness to say, you know, these people can make smart decisions too. How do I help them do what I want to do is really a cool thing. I know that you said like sustainability was an area that you were really interested in. And when I think about, I was jotting some words down when I was thinking about sustainability, like, you know, utilization of resources and access to resources and preservation of resources and good stewardship and responsibility. You know, and these are all the same type of things you're doing now. You may not be, it may be a different area you're doing it within, but you're definitely doing this type of like sustainable investing for people. Is that, would you look at it that way?
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that there are a lot of kind of synergies for sure. I think the like most obvious way that I still am kind of playing in the sustainability space is a lot of the companies that we are kind of evaluating at Girl Math and that I am, deciding whether or not to invest in have a sustainability lens to them. And I think one of the coolest things about alternative investing and angel investing in particular is your check is a vote towards a company that you think needs to exist in the world. And the way that, I invested before was very passive and I was not, thinking about how my capital was going towards solution to climate change or
Mm.
solutions to fast fashion or solutions to, alternatives to toxic cleaning products or like all these things. So I think the cool thing about what the space I'm in now is no matter what your passion or your expertise is, you kind of get to bring that to your personal investing thesis and you get to contribute to those solutions that you want to see more of in the world. So that's the most, I would say, um, like obvious link in my mind
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah. That makes sense.
my sustainability background. But I totally agree with what you said too, in terms of kind of how you define sustainability and what we're building at Girl Math as well. So yeah.
So two things as we kind of wrap up the conversation. It's been so good to catch up with you and excited to see what you're doing. I've been watching it from a distance, but it's kind of fun to see it and hear about it one on one. The If you're thinking about somebody in their career, you know, you
Mhm.
go back a handful or plus years for you now, or just anybody you've kind of bump into that might be anywhere in their journey. What have you learned so far, Serena, that's like, hey, this is a good piece of advice that I picked up along the way, either through the School of Hard Knocks or somebody shared it with me that I think everybody should probably consider kind of making this part of their routine, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, a few things. One is you learn by doing. And if you want to learn about a space, find a way to just start doing things in it. Whether you're interested in breaking into venture capital and you just want to start writing a couple angel checks so you start to understand what the, process looks like of sourcing and going through the diligence process and connecting with founders, all of that. Or if you want to start your own company and you're working in the corporate world, start a little side hustle or find a startup that needs the skills that you have and do consulting work on the side and like just try your hand at things. I think one of the things that limited me early in my career was this fear that I didn't know enough to get started. And I think there's a quote that I heard recently that says you don't have to be great to get started, but you have to get started to be great. And I think that's really critical to keep in mind. You learn by doing. You can't, go on to like have your dream career if you don't take the first step. And yeah, it can be small. It doesn't have to be like quitting your job to go, start your own company. Like you can take little steps, but I think having those experiences, one, like gives you more data points to know, like, do I really want to do this? Is this something that I'm good at? is this something I want to do more full time? But also just like demystifies it a bit and makes you realize that you do often have the skills that you need, or it's not as hard to learn as you might have thought initially. So, yeah, learning by doing is a big one. And then the other one is really, I think, connected, but no one knows as much as you think they do. So if you are choosing, not to go start your own company or not to go, like pivot your career because you think that other people know more, you're wrong. No one really knows. Those people just took the leap and learned by doing. So I think that once I realized, and a lot of this came from talking to founders that I knew or people who I thought were doing really impressive things, and realizing that like they were also just figuring it out. And like these
Yeah.
people are incredibly successful and impressive. And, I'm not trying to like diminish their credentials. I'm just trying to like humanize them and say like the biggest difference I've seen in the people who are like disproportionately successful and like have the careers that I aspire to have are the ones who just like took the leap of faith and really sought out experiences to get to build the expertise that they wanted, but didn't like wait for that to come to them.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because sometimes you feel like, oh, I have to know everything. It's like you're going to
Totally.
learn a lot in the process. You're going to learn a lot from doing it. So I wrote a bunch of things down. The idea of you learn by doing. You try your hand at things, and then no one knows enough to get started. That's a great line. And also the idea, kind of the companion piece to it, is no one knows as much as you think they do. So don't
Yeah.
let that slow you down so much. So we'll put a note in the notes. Put a comment in the notes here so people can find out more about Girl Math Capital and maybe add another 600 people to your wait list. How's that sound?
Would love that. Yes. Follow us on LinkedIn. Apply to join the next cohort if you're interested in, breaking into alternative investing. If you're a full-time investor and want access to our deal flow and our network, you can join as a community member. And then if you're based in New York, we have events in the city all the time, and we're quickly expanding our in-person presence to other cities as well. So there's lots of ways to connect with us.
Awesome. I think I better have you back here next year to see where you're standing then. You're going to be moving.
I would love that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Serena. And thank you everybody for listening to the podcast today. I really appreciate a chance to catch up with Serena. As you can tell, she's going places and doing things, not 10 years from now, but today. And that's what I encourage all of you to do as well. Pick up a copy of Disrupt Everything and Win, Take Control of Your Future, which I wrote with my co-author, James Patterson. And that's all I have for today. So go make it a good one.